Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you so much, Tracy, for having me.
Sonal, let me ask you to introduce yourself to the listeners. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Of course. As you already know, I'm a technology consultant at PwC. I have worked with the firm for over 4 years, close to 4 years now. I came to Canada around 6 years ago as an immigrant to study to do my MBA here in Canada. And before that, I worked with another big four in technology risk and as well as did my engineering back in India. So most of my family is back in India. I've been living away from them for almost 18 years, as we discussed before, since I was 14. Yeah, that kind of sums up my
I
journey.
think
So,
as I said the last time, that's a big deal to move away from home at 14 to study in the technological field. That must have been like a really big decision for you and for your family.
yeah, they were not the most happy about it that I'd want to stay away and study because, of course, they loved me and they wanted me to be there. I was not one of the naughty kinds who they wanted to discipline and send to a boarding school. And in general, my parents have been liberal enough. So, yeah, it was a big decision, but mainly looking back, it seems like a bigger decision. When I was 14, it was very straightforward for me that I need to study. I need to study in a good school, and that's the only way I can see it. Where my parents were living was a small town where they didn't have all the good education available at that stage, which I wanted. So I was like, okay, as a 14-year-old kid, you don't have many things to think about in your mind. So that's all I thought. Like looking back, I know the implications of it and how it impacted me, but yes, that was a big decision.
Yeah, I don't know. In North America, most 14-year-old girls are thinking about what to buy next at the shopping mall. They're not thinking so in such a focused way about, I need to study, I need the best school, how do I do it? You've been really focused, hyper focused, even since a really early age.
Yeah, considering that I lived most of my life in small towns, there were lesser distraction. There were no malls.
Yeah.
There were no malls. I was 14 like a long time back, 18 years ago. So there were lesser distractions, I would say. And also it's the culture within the family that matters ultimately. Like you have to achieve. There is no generational wealth you can bank upon. You have to earn to survive.
Yeah.
Things like that. So that makes you focused.
So I wanted you to be here to talk to us today because the theme of this podcast is new frontiers of potential, personal potential, and human potential. And you are someone who has again and again, repeatedly, broken through what would have been a block node, a node point of saying, yeah, maybe that's not possible for me, or that's not going to work. You've done it many times. Just say something about those different moments for you.
Yeah, so one day I was journaling and I was writing these 5 key decisions which shaped my life and wondering what would have happened if I would have gone the other way. So number one of those decisions is, of course, moving away from home at 14.
Yeah.
Because once you move away from that protective shell, what happens is you are faced with the most blunt responses and you're given direct feedback on what you're doing, whether it's right or wrong, and there's no excuse to make with because there are no parents there, so you don't have any option to cry and throw tantrums and still get your way. So that that kept me disciplined a lot. I still look at it as one of the best decisions I ever made in the past in my life so far, I would say. The second such decision was choosing to come here to Canada. So one, like when I was applying to schools, of course, I was applying to India and I had the option to stay back in India, study from one of the schools there, or come to Canada. And I believed that I liked the idea of challenging myself and going beyond my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And given, even though like I am not taking like traditionally a person who would I want to see 80 countries before I die. And I am fine if I see only two, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, I do want to I took it as a journey of self-awareness and exploration to understand because I was young, I have no responsibilities. I couldn't find a reason why not to do it. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And again, I didn't think a lot. I just said, okay, this is like a good school, one of the top schools in Canada. Why not? So
This was for, sorry, this was for MBA or something else?
yes,
Yeah.
MBA. Yeah, it was for, I did my MBA at University of Rotman School of Management. So it was well ranked. I knew that I do have the potential to continue in my career journey. I will get many opportunities, which I did now as a consultant at PwC. So that was the two the key defining decisions. Others were more personal in terms of there was a time when I thought, okay, I might move back to India because I I am in a relationship and should I move back? And that was one of the notes which was the most difficult, even though it seems personal and seems like at point may seem obvious to some people. I never wanted to put myself in a position where I have to choose between my career and my personal life. And I felt it defined me. And without going into any specifics, I would say that it defined me and told me that I care about myself and I would not put up with things which I don't believe in. So that was one of the keynotes, which kind of, because I kept thinking about that decision for quite some time after doing it, when I decided I won't go back, because I was almost about to go back.
Wow.
So those were the three key decisions I would say that shaped a lot of where I am today.
Wow, that's really something. I tell me again, because I've forgotten, I'm sorry, that the degrees or many degrees that you did in India are in which field?
So I did my engineering in electronics and communication, mainly because I loved as a student, I was always really good at math. I loved science. And I was like, okay, this is the perfect combination to go. And there's something about technology that always made me feel that this is something which has the potential to change our lives. And that ideology has only strengthened over these years.
Yeah.
So that is why I wanted to go into engineering, give myself a chance to see and what any engineering does. And like I'm not working in an electronics company right now, but at the same time, what a degree like engineering does is give you the ability to critically think across problems, because there are problems you learn which you may not ever apply exactly like a differential equation in real world unless you choose that path specifically, but it gives you the ability to think through
Yeah.
and builds that critical thinking skill set, which really helped me a lot. And ultimately, I did go into technology risk with Deloitte right after my engineering, which was again a reflection of what I did in my as an undergrad. So that is one of the degrees I started with. And yes, and then there is my MBA.
Cool. So I had wanted to just chat with you specifically about new frontiers for women in general in the corporate workspace, in the corporate structure, and just talking about your experience personally, what around you, that there are new areas of the workspace in general that women are relatively new in, or at least are going to be, let's say, an extreme minority in their particular workspace, and also in specific leadership
Mhm.
functions.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? I'm interested to know whether you see women trying to do the men's way of leading, and it almost seems weird because I'm not somebody who wants to talk about gender. I know that there are different innate styles of leadership that are both very powerful and effective, but are different from each other. And just speak to that a little bit.
100%. So I think I'll go back and say that when I started and the first exposure I had to, oh, women need extra support or there should be a group called Women in Tech, was when I started my internship with the Gender and the Economy group at Rotman during my summer internship. So our amazing professor Sarah Kaplan leads that, and it is amazing initiative. It talks. I wrote co-authored 6 case studies around the discrimination that women face. And then I joined PwC, and where I started observing that, okay, there is a group. And then I got involved with the Women in Tech initiative here, which helped me tremendously network around and find people in in the firm who connected and resonated with the idea. And again, here I would point out that there's no specific, like whatever I say is not specific to PwC or doesn't represent their views. But at the same time, I am heavily involved in all initiatives which work towards advancement of women. Coming back to your question about adopting masculine behaviors, right? So I'll explain this in psychological terms. How
Yeah.
you, as a child, you touch a hot object, you realize, okay, it will burn you, you don't do that again. So maybe sometime a woman went into a meeting and expressed something which is more aligned with feminine identity, and she received a particular response, and then she learned, maybe I should do it the other way. Then she saw a man doing something and he was very well received, and she started to do the same thing as the man does. And it is not because that she didn't feel that her qualities are good enough, but she was trying to fit in. So a lot of the, and there's a huge, this is a very important topic because we sometimes forget that what is the unique abilities of feminine and masculine. A easier example to understand would be, do you want your mother to act like your father? No. Like I can say, I don't want it. And neither do I want my father to start acting like my mother. There are some things I want to discuss with my mother and some things. So those are the very traditional roles of feminine and masculine and how they come together to help you and support you in a favorable ecosystem. So I think even same at workplace, we need to acknowledge the abilities that both feminine and masculine for roles bring to the table. And I think the reason we started transitioning from more feminine identities to masculine is that we realized that, okay, traditionally men have been successful in this role, and that is the way to go. So it was the example that was set for us. However, I think we need, this is the perfect time to, now that we see a lot of women entrepreneurs coming up, lot of women coming in C-suite positions. I think this is the perfect time to stop and see, okay, we did to start off with that, but there's nobody forcing us to continue doing that now, right? So even though like we have adopted a certain like work style because of many reasons like societal pressures or so having observed things around us, but I would say that what is important moving forward is to understand what, discover yourself and understand that you don't need to behave like somebody else. Even if it's as simple as like Tracy, you don't want to be Sonal, and Sonal, you don't want to be Tracy, right? So similarly, you don't want to be like, you don't want to be somebody else. So now that you have achieved it, now you have built a sense of self, it is important to stop and reflect, and that will go a long way. Because as I told you, right, the next generation who are girls under 14 or still very young, they don't even know that there's a discrimination. They don't even know that, like, they just know what they are.
Yeah.
So they don't even know there's a discrimination. And let's not continue setting that example of you have to do it a certain way. A very good example, I was super impressed with Julie Sweet, who's Accenture's CEO, right? She recently publicly announced her breast cancer is coming back, has come back. And although she will, it was decided that she'll continue to lead in her role, but it is so unconventional. How many times have you seen CEOs come and say, we are vulnerable, we are not perfect?
Yeah.
Because traditionally, men have held those roles and they are known, again, like I would everything say with a big caveat that it's not restricted and it's a high level generalization that leaders are known to be strong, stoic, because traditionally they have, those roles have been held by men. But that doesn't mean that what a leader means can't change in the future now that women are stepping into those roles, right? So she set a very good example, and the support she received shows that the society has built an appetite for it. So why not? again, like, why not? So why continue trying to act like a man when you don't need to?
So what would be some specific behaviors or attitudes women believing that they'll be more successful in those kind of behaviors or attitudes? Can you say how does it look in real life?
Yeah. So one example, like I said, is not showing vulnerability because, of course, it's considered not good enough. Men are known to be less expressive, as to say, which is not a bad thing at times, but it traditionally is what masculine roles have stood for. So being vulnerable was one. So even though I was more expressive, maybe at the beginning of my career, that I'm really sad, I can come to the office sad. Then I learned, oh, nobody is showing their sadness in the office. Let's learn how to not be happy always. Or even things like a lady coming after mat leave, right? So there is no, of course, there's a good support system in many firms, including PwC, but they're like, but we feel this internal pressure to act as if nothing big has happened, nothing has changed. You can continue working similar to what you were doing before. But a big thing has changed. And it does not need to be something that holds you back at work, but it can help you in many ways. But just acknowledge it. So that's one, like acknowledging you are different and it's okay to be different. Second, I would say is being empathetic. So at times, being empathetic or kind is also seen as being a pushover. Although I would say that yes, there should be a fine balance between it. But one of these qualities is that, oh, men are strict and like you have to follow this rule and there's no like leeway given to people. So again, not all men are like that. I have had amazing female mentors who have brought me where I am today. But at the same time, again, at a general level, it does say that you can't be as empathetic because otherwise people will walk all over you. That is one other characteristic which I see women pushing down, trying to be lesser, be more assertive, and rather than trying to be kind and soft always. Many women are owning up to, okay, this is what they are and they will continue, but larger portion, they're still trying to be like firm and behave as if there's no emotion. You don't have your cycles, you don't have like, you're not in, didn't step into a motherhood role, incidentally, you came back. So that,
I think those things continue in many workplaces to be seen as a kind of weakness that needs to be, if you want to advance in your career, you have to minimize the perceived weaknesses about yourself so that you will be receiving promotions, that you'll be supported by the upper management for bigger opportunities because they perceive you to be fully up to the task, let's say. And
yeah,
I have a theory, and I don't know what you think about this, but
it's your,
I think that if we just investigate or learn about from people who speak a lot about masculine and feminine energetics, so not speaking about men and women as gendered individuals, but about a certain kind of energy that exists in nature. We have plus and minus, we have one and zero, we have yin and yang. Like this dichotomy, this duality is part of the world around us. And all parts of both of those things belong to actual male and female human beings.
yeah,
But by virtue of, I don't know whether it's a hormonally driven thing that has to do with neurotransmitters or something else, but men tend to naturally be very good in the realm of hyperfocus. Women tend to be naturally at ease in the realm of multitasking and overview. And I think it's this clash of worldview or basic perceptual competencies that enable women to be able to have a larger picture view, which needs to be paired with the hyperfocus in order to bring that vision into the real world. But it also enables women to be able to identify blind spots in the larger organization. And I think that nobody wants, in a business context, to have their blind spots exposed. I think this is a place where I'll give you an example. I spoke with a woman I happen to know personally, and I know that she is an engineer in a large firm, who told me a story about that her company brought in some very expensive consultants who told them to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And she said immediately, she pointed out to them, this is not going to work because of this. And in 18 months, that's going to fall apart because it's not sustainable. And 2 years down the road, I see this problem coming. And of course, they went ahead and did it anyway. And she ended up changing to another department in the same overall business and ran into the man who had previously been her immediate supervisor, who said to her, I'll bet you're happy to hear that everything that you said came true. And she said, I'm not happy at all about that. I wish I would be happy if someone had listened to me 2 years ago. That would make me happy. I'm not happy now that the company spent millions of dollars that could have been avoided. And I thought that was a really archetypal example of that it's an uncomfortable place to have to be in the presence of someone who can see what the others can't see. And that highlights a vulnerability on their side. Does it ring true for you somehow that it's not so much about the boys want to have everything and they don't want the girls to come, but it's more about a clash of perceptual approach?
Yeah, 100%. I think I would say that although we may not be able to generalize whether, like, even when people say women are better multitaskers, I feel sometimes it is used against women. Oh, now you can handle children, you can handle work, you can handle your family and everything. So everybody who says women are multitasker, like good multitaskers, even though I know to a large extent it is true, and I've seen it in real life. But I try to, so it's coming back to what you said, that yes, it could be one of the cases, because in general, I would say it's not even like you said about men versus women, that men want to have it all, but it's just about the fact that it's a different perception, it's a different point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm reading this book currently, which is called Surrounded by Idiots. What it basically tells you is 4 different archetypes of
Surrounded by what? Sorry, I missed.
Surrounded by idiots.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it talks about that, why you may feel that you're surrounded by idiots just because their perception is different. So it categorizes people into 4 different categories, not a very hard categorization, but red, blue, yellow, green. And it talks about everybody's focus is different, and that's why the one you may think the other is wrong. Coming back to the example, it may or may not, like some cases, I would say super focus is required. Some cases, a broader view is required. So it's very important to understand what women bring to the table and align them with the right sort of roles, right? So in some cases where, and again, going to leadership position, we have all sorts of leaders. There are leaders who are super focused. There are leaders who can do it all, right? There, I would say that both sort of perspective is important and they should work together rather than trying to win one over the other. So I guess your question was the other, like whether the masculine gender thinks that their vulnerabilities will get exposed. I am not 100% sure whether that could be the reason, or it could be just the difference in perspective, like you said.
Yeah, the difference in perspective.
So I think people are skeptical to change, and they don't want to change, and they want to keep things the way it is. And they have to start. So one is women have to stop and think more about how they want to proceed on from here and set the right example for generations to come. At the same time, I think men have to stop and adapt and start adapting that this is the new world order. It is not going back. You cannot reverse it. No matter even if there only 2% of VC funds go to women entrepreneurs, this will only grow. It is not going back to less than that.
Yeah, it's interesting you just said that, because as I told you at the beginning, I happen to be in New York right now. I came here to attend Deep Tech Week in New York City. So I spent all day yesterday in fantastic sessions. One of them was about the physics of consciousness, which was one of the most
wow.
incredible 2 or 3 hours that I've ever spent with really
That's
the
so good.
top people in the field. It was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
But it occurred to me that every system is energetically a masculine thing by definition. Systems are a masculine structure. It's a tool. A system is a tool, and maps and instructions, those kind of things are the masculine energetic that brings the idea through and allows it to become something. And yet, so I mean, by saying that, it's the masculine and feminine come together and become an idea, becomes a product or something marketable. But it's very easy for a system to become almost hyper masculinized, where data and proof and evidence goes from being a tool to being the object of worship. And there gets to be an emotional charge around the idea of evidence and proof that is beyond what it actually means in reality. So that I think many great ideas get brushed away in the inception phase because they don't meet the standard of proof or evidence. And one of the things that I learned yesterday that blew me away, a woman who is in the biotech field who spoke, there were a lot of women speaking at this conference, by the way, but she said that 97% of new drugs fail in the human trial phase, having already passed through untold billions of dollars of development cost, R&D. 97% of those things are not passing in the human drug trial phase. You want to stop and say, if anything would make us stand back and say, what's going on here? Like, how could we continue this in this freight train of the wrong direction, of pouring billions of dollars essentially down the drain when something needs to change upstream in order to bring different kind of ideas pass through some filter that they're not getting through at the moment. I think some of the things that I hear women speaking about in the online space is trying to talk louder, encouraging women to have a voice and to speak louder and to speak up. And of course, in some cases where it's not your personality, it's good for you to learn those things. But that would be among the masculine things, or that women are feeling that they're being excluded. So using your power or authority to forcibly exclude some voices at the table would be an example of a masculine energetic thing. Or using your authority to override or to veto something, or to diminish another idea. And I think that I don't see it so much as any kind of intentional thing, but that the system itself is designed, as you just said, to perpetuate itself. The systems don't want to change. The people in the systems are invested in maintaining them, even when you see something as crazy as the system wants to stay the same, even though for all these years it's been so close to 100% failing. And yet no one is, I shouldn't say no one is advocating, certainly lots of people are, but it doesn't seem to make a change far enough upstream to say we need to approach this from a different direction.
Absolutely, exactly. Because overall people think it's a net positive, and that's enough. That's because ultimately we are doing research. And another statistics I was reading another book some time ago, which talks about how much research, when research gets approved and funded, every time a research is approved, there's an equivalent amount of, not equivalent, the amount of research which gets rejected is almost 600 years of worth of research that gets rejected and never gets funded. And that is even long before the human trial phase. So I would say that the 97% has even deeper statistics and much more if you calculate in terms of time investment, it would be way more. And I think that is one of the reasons, because people focus on the net positive. People are not looking at the root cause, right? So, for example, that there are big tech companies with male CEOs, they are doing amazing. And the argument can be, so what can women do? Maybe if you let women be CEOs, there will be better companies than
Yeah.
the big tech right now. Who knows what can be done? Unless you try it, you won't know it, is the answer. So I completely agree with the what you just said, that people want, even though if it might be close to 100% failing, they are okay with that, because they want to preserve like, so much resistance to change there is in the society, that people don't want to move past it. People think, oh, there are more important issues. But if you go deeper and deeper, you would see the root cause of it is also that you're not considering entirety of the society. Society is made up of men and women. You are taking even the research training data today, right? There's so much resolution that which we are trying to still figure out is how to train our AI systems with the right data. Right now, the data you're feeding it is still biased. It has more men. And it is not because traditionally men haven't wanted to include women. Many men, I feel everybody I meet as my mentor is so supportive. I'm even extra supportive of women. But traditionally, the way society was built, women were put into a more caregiving role and men were considered as breadwinners role. And it just perpetuated into something bigger where people traditionally, the systems became more masculine and women started to feel left out, because the technology evolved. Women don't need to stay at home all the time when they are like pregnant, or they need to adapt to it. And somewhere we, like, that part got left behind. That we were the traditional roles, the root causes traditional roles, the society expectations of women. Oh, you should look pretty and be like caregivers and things. And that kind of just carried on even while the technology went a lot more ahead than that thought process. So that thought has to catch up to the level of technical growth that is happening and the possibilities that are happening. So I agree, there's a gap there. And I think a lot of the work needs to also, I agree that in general, there are different causes, like I just mentioned, of why women do what they do. But at the same time, it's a very good place we are in right now where we need to stop and, as women, do an internal reflection that what would happen if I become more vulnerable. And Julie Sweet, like literally set a very great example for all women to follow through, right? What would happen? Would you be taken down from your position just because you decided to be more vulnerable, which traditionally leaders are not supposed to be? Maybe not. Maybe you will receive support, and maybe you will notice that actually men are much more receptive than they were yesterday.
And interestingly, it would be a very brave thing to be more
Yeah,
vulnerable.
exactly. It is a very brave thing. And like I always say this line to my friends that it took me a long time to understand that being vulnerable is a strength, requires strength. So it is very important. And I think that all of that strength does exist. So we should try and free up ourselves from that pressure of trying to be more masculine. A lot of it, so it's a mix of internal and external pressure. At least let go of the internal ones and we will fight off the external ones together.
Yeah, that's great advice. So let me just ask you before we finish up, what do you think is the next frontier of your potential, or what's your kind of maybe big dream that you're going towards, or the next phase for you? What's next?
What's next? Okay. Yeah. I keep thinking about what's next, but ultimately, I think what's next is building that your understanding, going deeper into self-discovery. So now, wherever I am, I wouldn't say I would like to go deeper into this journey of understanding what I bring to the table and encouraging myself to look from a lens which is not through society's lens, but I have started to, so earlier, for example, and women always do this. Whenever somebody would say, God, you're amazing, you should try, you should like like my US colleagues, come to US, you will thrive. It is such a perfect place. And I would be like, no, I don't think so. Next step for me is not underestimating myself and go and believing what everybody sees, what everybody keeps seeing in me, accepting that it is true and understanding my own potential. So I think this is a very interesting point where I am at. I am trying to discover so much more, trying to go beyond my comfort zone, trying to think. And I keep connecting with somehow, like we connected somehow, right? And there are more women like you who inspired me and continue to inspire everybody around them. So thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This was really helpful. And whatever you talked about, even now and before when we spoke, it has been super inspirational.
Wonderful. This was great. Thank you very much for doing this. Let me just ask, where can people reach you? What's the best place to connect?
LinkedIn is the best place to reach.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah.
I will put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So for
Of
anyone
course.
who's listening, you'll find it there.
Of course.
Wonderful. Thanks for doing this. And I hope that we'll stay in touch.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Yeah, take care, Tracy. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.